Our story follows a lone adventurer who defies a taboo by eating monsters. Each time he consumes one, his dislocated hand and wounds heal, and he gains the monster's skills such as roar and bowlax. A nobleman's diary once declared that devouring monsters is forbidden in this world. For a human to eat a monster means to absorb its evil essence. The first symptom is an indescribable euphoria accompanied by physical strengthening. The second symptom brings severe headaches, nausea, and intoxication. The third symptom is sudden death or possibly transforming into a monster. Our protagonist, however, continuously slashes and consumes monsters, gaining new skills with each meal. A few minutes later, he faced a huge python while devouring another monster, acquiring agility boost and lightning cloak skills. The python swiftly lunged at him, its mouth wide open to devour him whole. He waited until he was inside its mouth, then activated his new lightning cloak skill, electrocuting the python and killing it instantly. He continued deeper into the labyrinth, killing and eating the monsters in his path, gaining even more skills. After consuming a huge spider, he acquired thread manipulation skills, which he used to trap the surrounding monsters effortlessly. Exhausted and full, he believed he could now return home safely. But his hope was shattered when he heard the sound of approaching footsteps and saw a swarm of monsters glaring at him with rage. He cursed in frustration and vowed to survive and return home alive. In the frontier city of Bologna, a territory known for its multiple labyrinths, there is one called the Miasma Labyrinth. The air inside this labyrinth continually saps the strength of visiting adventurers who loathe it. Yet our protagonist, Rude, frequents it so often that he has earned the nickname Miasma Scavenger. On the 6th floor of the dungeon, he smiled upon seeing a patch of miasma grass. He knew that miasma grass had the ability to purify the labyrinth's toxic air and was an invaluable source of income for him. As he began to harvest the grass, he resolved not to take too much, just what he needed. After gathering enough to last him around 3 days, he started to leave, smiling at his fortune. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him and turned to see a swarm of miasma rat monsters glaring at him angrily. He rushed at the rats, which released poison in response. He knew many monsters in the labyrinth used miasma and poison, contributing to the adventurer's aversion to the place. However, these tactics were ineffective against him. He slashed one of the rats, angering the others, which then jumped at him to attack. He managed to slash another, but one rat clung to his arm and tried to bite his head. Fortunately, his arm armor blocked the attack. Just then he heard someone shout, "Fireball!" and a fireball struck the rat on his arm, throwing both him and the rat to the ground. He saw the rat explode, which surprised and stunned him for a moment. As he regained his senses, he heard an irritated voice complain about missing the target. A dark-haired man scolded a brown-haired man, who had cast the fireball, for not getting closer before attacking. Rude recognized the group from the Adventurers Guild by the emblems on their coats. The brown-haired man reached out to help Rude up, apologizing for the fireball and asking if his name was Rude. He explained that they just wanted to help since Rude seemed to be struggling. However, Rude stood up without accepting the man's hand, thanked him for the sentiment, and asked that he give a heads up before doing anything like that again. The man was annoyed and replied that was why he shouted fireball. Then a chubby man called his teammates over, excited about the miasma grass colony they had found. Rude, shocked, asked if they had been following him for his harvesting spot. The man furiously glared at him and insisted they were just fellow adventurers making a living in the labyrinth and happened to meet Rude there. They had saved him in the process. The man then angrily shouted that Rude, known as the Miasma Scavenger, couldn't even express proper gratitude, which angered Rude. However, seeing them ready to attack, he calmed down and apologized, thanking them for saving him while enduring his frustration. Later, in Bologna at the Fully Belly restaurant, Rude was thrown to the floor. A bald man shouted that Rude's presence made the food smell terrible. Another man teasingly told him they were saying this because he couldn't seem to understand it. The man then walked closer and held fire near Rude's face, taunting him that an adventurer should be able to defeat monsters. He insulted Rude, saying his skill, abnormal status nullification, was trash and didn't make him a real adventurer, which hurt and angered Rude. Abnormal status nullification was Rude's unique ability. which made him invaluable for exploring the miasma labyrinth. However, it didn't grant him the necessary skills to defeat monsters, vital for any adventurer. Without combat skills, he was unwelcome in any party and earned the nickname Miasma Scavenger because he scavenged for items in the lower levels of the labyrinth. In other words, his supposedly useless skill made him an outcast as an adventurer. Although he was a grown man, he still had to fight life-or-death battles against mere rats, making him wonder if he would spend the rest of his life as the Miasma Scavenger. The next morning, he headed to the Adventurers Guild, knowing he needed to find another miasma herb colony while he still had some money left from yesterday. He noticed the guild was unusually noisy, with adventurers bustling around. Curious, he asked the receptionist if any good requests had come in. She recognized him and informed him that a new labyrinth had been discovered. This news surprised him, as a new labyrinth meant treasures and magical items, a golden opportunity for any adventurer. He realized this was why the guild was so lively. The receptionist then told him that starting today, the price of miasma herbs would drop from 100 gold to 30 gold. Shocked, he loudly asked why. She explained that the miasma labyrinth was never popular, and with everyone heading to the new labyrinth, there would be no demand for the herbs. This news made him worry and panic. She continued, saying the new labyrinth was in the Avelio Mountains, but he wasn't allowed to go there. When he asked why, she explained that the new labyrinth's exploration requirement was to be D rank or higher, and as an E rank, he wasn't qualified. Frustrated and desperate, he pleaded with the receptionist, asking if there was any way he could join the expedition. She sighed and told him those were the rules, and even if he went, he would only end up dying in vain. Suddenly, a man appeared behind him and said that if Rude wanted to go that badly, he should join his party as a porter. The man then smiled at him softly. Later, they were on their way to the new labyrinth, traveling inside a carriage with Bayer's party. Bayer smiled and told Rude how glad he was to meet him because he needed someone to carry materials from the new labyrinth, but hadn't been able to find anyone. Rude remained silent, thinking it was probably because all the adventurers in the guild had flocked to the new labyrinth, making it difficult to secure a porter. One of Bayer's party members spoke up, asking why they were diving with a miasma scavenger of all people, and suggesting that Bayer could have found someone better. Bayer shyly told his members not to say such things. He explained that since Rude had been an adventurer for a long time, he had been a very good. It was better to have him along rather than a complete newbie. Bayer then introduced himself as the leader of the Scarlet Sword Party and introduced his members, Sasha and Rick, who were both D-rank adventurers. Root introduced himself as an E-rank adventurer and said it was a pleasure working with them. Before diving in, Bayer asked to know more about Root's status and if he minded showing his guild card. Root agreed and retrieved his guild card from his bag. He opened it to reveal he was level 7 with health 22, strength 18, endurance 16, magic 9, spirit 7, and agility 15, along with his skills. Bayer was amazed to see that Root could use fire magic. Root explained that the power was too low for use in battle, but came in handy in dark places and for cooking. Bayer laughed and told him that it was still plenty helpful, so he was counting on him. Later, they arrived at their destination, which amazed Sasha and Rick. Bayer announced their arrival at the recently discovered Avelio Labyrinth. Sasha excitedly asked if it looked like they were the first ones to arrive, and Rick eagerly suggested they start exploring immediately. They opened the gate, but their excitement quickly turned to disappointment as they saw the labyrinth was already crowded. They headed to the right and saw adventurers harvesting herbs. On the left, they saw adventurers fighting monsters. When they explored further, they found adventurers opening chests. Sasha, frustrated, shouted that there were adventurers everywhere, which was annoying. Bayer told his team that it seemed like most of the first layer had already been explored. Rick asked Sasha if she wasn't the one who said they were the first to arrive, which only pissed her off more. Rick then suggested they dive deeper, reasoning there would probably be fewer people further down. Sasha agreed, but Bayer cautioned that since it was a newly discovered labyrinth, it would be better to start by mapping the first layer. Sasha snapped, asking if she was hearing the porter giving his opinion, and Rick called Rude an old man, saying that was why he was stuck in E rank. Bayer told Sasha and Rick to quit it, assuring them Rude didn't mean any harm. Bayer then said he agreed with both of them, because if things continued like that, they wouldn't get any good results, so they would aim even deeper. Later, they arrived on the 4th layer of the Avelio labyrinth and faced a huge wolf monster. Rude was shocked and scared, but Rick easily hit the wolf with his weapon, telling Rude not to be so scared of those small fries. On the other side, Sasha used her magic to electrocute the monsters, while Bayer slashed through his side with his sword. Rude was in awe of their strength, yet he couldn't move his body. A moment later, when the last wolf fell dead, Bayer sheathed his sword. Sasha, sitting next to a treasure chest, said diving deeper was the right call, and it felt nice without the other parties around. Bayer agreed, noting that the monsters weren't too strong and they had found some treasure. Rick then called out and ordered Rude to collect the materials from the monsters he had defeated. Rude replied that he couldn't because the monsters were too damaged and their magic stones were probably shattered. Rick angrily asked what if they weren't destroyed and told him not to slack off. Pissed but powerless, Rude agreed and went to collect the materials. As he approached the wolf Rick had killed, he noticed the mangled body, with guts and blood making it smell awful. He wondered if Rick really had to go that far. Lifting a small flame on his finger, he wondered if it would be better to burn it a little. Rick noticed and laughingly said the old man had started burning the monster and asked if he was going to eat it. Rick then joked that after exploring for a while, he was starting to feel hungry and even the monster's meat looked delicious. Sasha told him to stop because it was gross and reminded him that it was taboo among adventurers to eat monsters since the mana would be absorbed into their bodies, and no one knew what would happen. Rick assured her he was joking and said when they got back, he would use his earnings to eat as much delicious food as he wanted. Suddenly, they heard a terrifying scream from a monster which horrified and stunned them. A huge monster then appeared in front of them, a minotaur, a B-rank monster. Rude couldn't believe it, wondering why such a formidable creature was in a lair so shallow. Sasha shouted that there was no way they could beat something like that and stutteringly asked what they should do, saying he would use some items and told Rude to keep an eye on the monster's movements. Rude stutteringly agreed and asked Bayer if he had a plan. Bayer smiled creepily, raised his sword, and replied that he had a great one. Suddenly, Bayer slashed Rude's back, causing him to fall in pain. Bayer called for Sasha and Rick. Rick threw his axe at Rude while using his warrior's encouragement skill, making Rude the focus of the monster's attack. Rick's axe slammed down near him, and then Sasha used her haste skill to double their speed. Rude stutteringly asked if they had planned to abandon him from the start. But Bayer just asked why they would bring the miasma scavenger otherwise, which both angered and horrified Rude. They ran away, with Bayer shouting for Rude to buy them some time. Rude cursed them in anger. When the Minotaur raised its axe, he focused his gaze and dodged its attack. He slammed to the ground but taunted the Minotaur, saying it served him right. He knew it was the end for him as the Minotaur rushed at him again. It slammed him into a wall, making him cough up blood. The force of the impact cracked and collapsed the wall behind him, revealing a hole on the other side. Both Rude and the Minotaur fell through, crashing to the floor inside the hole. Rude opened his eyes, incredulous that he was still alive. He looked to his side and saw that the Minotaur was caught under the rubble. He knew it was only a matter of time before he died too. Even if no other monsters came, he would die from blood loss or starvation before his body healed. Feeling an overwhelming hunger, he looked at the dead Minotaur, tempted to eat it. He asked himself what he was thinking, knowing that eating a monster would only lead to disaster. He closed his eyes, reflecting on the miserable life he had lived. But then he remembered an adventurer's advice from his childhood: no matter how hard or painful it gets, never give up. Driven by those words, he made a desperate decision. He began tearing into the dead Minotaur's flesh with his teeth, knowing full well the risks. A human who has depleted their magic and consumes mana-rich monster meat will have the monster's mana particles invade their body. The monsterized state is a terrifying fate, worse than death by poison, which is why it was a taboo. In a gamble to regain the blood he had lost and sate his hunger, Rude brought about an unexpected transformation. A moment later, he walked deeper into the labyrinth, dragging the Minotaur's axe. He came upon a corridor full of bat monsters hanging from the ceiling. With monstrous eyes, he growled, catching the bats' attention. They flew down to attack him, but he used his new skill, Roar. which intimidated the opponents with a thunderous sound, hitting every bat close to him. More bats descended to attack, and he used his physical boost skill, temporarily enhancing his strength. He swung the huge axe, crushing the bats to death. He grabbed one of the bats and ate it, gaining the echolocation skill, which allowed him to detect surrounding creatures even in darkness. Using this new ability, he saw more monsters deeper in the labyrinth, noticing they were coming in swarms. Confidently, he asked them which one of them is going to get eaten next. A moment later, Rude was slashing and continuously killing monsters. He noticed that the battle axe fit perfectly in his hand, and he could sense the monster's magic without even having to look at them. After killing them, he devoured them and observed that each time he consumed a monster, his injuries healed and power surged through his body. This newfound strength helped him continue fighting the swarm of monsters confidently. Later, he emerged from the labyrinth. As the light hit his face, he was stunned and surprised. Letting go of the axe, he was overjoyed to have made it back and shouted happily that he had survived. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, the atmosphere was tense. Adventurers looked at each other in fear as an old man stood before them. The Bologna Branch Guild Master, Lankars, addressed the Scarlet Sword Party, stating that after hearing their report, he had rounded up all the adventurers in the labyrinth except for Rude, who was with them. Bayer replied that when they encountered the Minotaur on the 4th floor, Rude was killed before they had a chance to protect him, expressing frustration that they couldn't save him. Lankars acknowledged their explanation and declared the labyrinth off limits for now. Just then, the guild door opened and the receptionist was shocked to see Rude enter, stunning everyone who believed he was dead. Bayer, Sasha, and Rick began sweating in fear, and even Lankars was surprised to see him. Bayer rushed to Rude, feigning concern, and whispered threateningly that if Rude said anything unnecessary, he would kill him. Rick asked if Rude was hurt, and Sasha claimed they had tried to go back for him, but the labyrinth was closed. Rude felt Rick's grip on his shoulder tighten. Bayer then suggested sweetly that they should celebrate Rude's survival elsewhere. Bayer and Rick exchanged glances when they realized they couldn't move. Rude then shouted that they had used him as a pawn, causing panic among the Scarlet Sword Party and shock among the other adventurers. Bayer, panicking, asked what Rude was talking about. Lankars demanded to know what Rude meant by being used as a pawn. Rude explained that Bayer had stolen his supplies and attacked him from behind. Rick had used a skill to lure the Minotaur toward him, and Sasha had cast haste on the others so they could run away. Bayer, in a defensive panic, shouted at Lankars that they didn't do any of it. Lankars told them they needed to clarify the truth of the matter. Just then, the Truth Officer entered the guild, shocking everyone. They wondered why the Truth Officer, who rarely left the royal capital, was there. Lankars explained that there had been an unusually high number of deaths among the porters temporarily joining Bayer's party, so he had called in an old favor to bring the Truth Officer there. Lankars then asked the Truth Officer to determine the truth of the claims between Bayer's party and Rude. The Truth Officer's eyes lit up as she declared that the members of Scarlet Sword were lying. She raised her wand and confirmed that Rude's claim was the truth, horrifying Bayer and shocking the other adventurers. Panicking, Bayer shouted and pointed at the Truth Officer, demanding to know how she could possibly know the truth. Lankars explained that the truth skill was impossible to acquire later in life, and its effectiveness rivaled that of a unique skill, meaning no lie could pass before the truth skill. He emphasized that nothing could be more trustworthy than the words of someone who had pledged to dedicate that power to the country, glaring at Bayer in anger and making him step back. Bayer then looked at the Truth Officer and thought that if only she weren't there, none of this would be happening. In a desperate move, he launched his sword at the Truth Officer, shocking Lankars and the Truth Officer. But Rude acted quickly, blocking Bayer's sword with his own just in time. He warned Bayer not to dare touch the Truth Officer, shocking Bayer, who angrily shouted Rude's name. Rude responded by punching Bayer in the face, sending him flying into the wall with such force that the impact was visible outside the guild. Sasha and Rick were horrified, but Rude calmly told Bayer that attacking the Truth Officer was not a good idea. Later, in the Adventurers Guild reception room, Lankars apologized to Rude for bothering him when he must be tired. Rude replied that it was okay, and asked about the Scarlet Sword Party. Lankars informed him that the three would be taken in by the staff for interrogation. If it's confirmed that they repeatedly used their porters as bait, the members of Scarlet Sword would lose all their possessions and adventurer qualifications, reducing them to slaves. Given that Bayer had crossed the truth officer, he likely wouldn't appear before Rude again. Rude was surprised when Lankers placed a bag of gold on the table, explaining that since the Scarlet Sword Party lost the right to profit from the new labyrinth, Rude should receive it. There was about 200,000 gold inside. After their discussion, Rude left the room and silently stared at the bag of gold in his hand, hugging it. He realized that this money could cover his living expenses and would take a long time to accumulate by gathering miasma grass. This made him realize that adventurers could actually make good money. He noticed other adventurers silently glaring at him, guessing that no one insulted him because of what they had witnessed earlier. However, he knew this didn't mean they would be kind to him either. He also knew that standing out too much might make others suspicious of his sudden rise in status, so he guessed he'd have to continue earning in the miasma labyrinth as before. He sighed, telling himself to stop being gloomy because he finally had some money and he could get his gear ready and eat whatever he wanted. He decided to head to the tool shop first and was surprised when he saw a magic bag. Afterward, he decided to get something to eat. The next day, he was back in the miasma labyrinth, easily killing the rats. He couldn't believe how easily they fell when he had to avoid 5 of them just the day before yesterday. Using his appraisal skill, he looked at a dead rat on the floor. It was level 9, its race was Beast Tribe, with health 24, strength 5, mana 16, spirit 3, endurance 12, agility 27, and its skill was miasma. He figured out that the appraisal skill he obtained by eating the Cyclops monster could even be used on corpses. He grabbed his guild ID, wondering how much his status had increased, and opened it, thinking he must be around level 20 because the rat was easy to defeat. To his astonishment, he saw that he was still ranked E but had reached level 42. His health was 188, mana points 136, strength 156, spirit 112, endurance 136, and agility 125, an incredible increase from before. He couldn't believe he had reached level 42 when just yesterday he was only at level 7. Realizing how rare this was, he decided to check the skills he had acquired. He opened his skill status and was excited to see he had gained many new skills. He remembered passing by the spot where he had fallen on the way back from the new labyrinth. The wall that had been broken was now sealed, and the new labyrinth would remain closed for a while. So, he planned to lightly explore the miasma labyrinth to test his new powers and see how effective they were on the deeper floors. He glanced at his side, where he had the magic bag he bought earlier, and headed to the stairs leading to the higher floors, wanting to choose the right monster for his first try. Later, he easily cleared the 6th, 9th, and 13th floors, but was disappointed because they didn't provide a challenge. He needed to go even farther to find more suitable prey. A moment later, he arrived at the 24th floor and saw a huge monster in armor guarding the area. He saw it walking around and used his appraisal skill on it, revealing it was a lizard soldier, level 25. From the dragon tribe race with good stats and skills like one-handed swordsmanship, shield techniques, and miasma resistance. He knew they were supposed to fight in coordination with their companions, but he only saw one and smiled, thinking it might be worth a try. He appeared behind the lizard soldier to attack and swung his sword at it. The monster immediately turned to face him, but he managed to slash its arm. He taunted it, saying it wasn't bad, but he wouldn't miss next time. Confused, he watched as it started to run deeper into the 24th floor. He chased after it, wondering if it was trying to escape. He was shocked when he realized it was a dead end. Approaching cautiously, he told the lizard soldier it couldn't escape now, but it just smiled and peeked back at him, glaring. Rude felt a presence behind him, cursing under his breath. When he peeked back, he saw more lizard soldiers closing in. Realizing it was a trap, he braced himself for the impending fight. He realized he had been set up. Given the disparity in their levels, the situation was dire. Suddenly, the lizard he had been chasing attacked him. Fortunately, he dodged and faced it, thinking that if he had to, he'd take them down one by one. He jumped and attacked one of the lizards. Though it blocked his attack, the force of his strike slammed it to the floor. As it glared at him, he raised his sword, ready to kill it, thinking he would end it right there. But another lizard, wielding a shield, blocked his attack, surprising and confusing him. Before he could react, he sensed a presence behind him and ducked just in time to dodge the lizard's attack from behind. It growled in anger, but he calmly told it that it was close and asked how many of them there were as the lizards surrounded him. He looked at them, astonished by their ambush tactics and coordination. Even if they were good at working together, their movements seemed too precise. Then he recalled a high-pitched sound just before they began coordinating. Noticing a red lizard behind the attacking soldiers, he used his appraisal skill. His power revealed it was the general lizard, level 32, a beast species with 116 health, 54 magic, 88 strength, 77 spirit, 68 endurance, and 69 agility. It had 3 skills: one-handed swordsmanship, shield technique, and command. He smiled, realizing he had found the boss. The general lizard screamed loudly, and the lizard soldiers screamed back, launching at him together. He activated his physical boost, screamed, and charged to meet them, slashing every lizard in his way. One lizard blocked his path, but he jumped on its head and vaulted over it, heading straight for the general lizard. It stared at him, and he told it he had found it. He swung his sword, but to his shock, it remained unscathed. The general lizard then launched its sword at him. Panicking, he knew he could dodge it, but instead he activated his steel body skill, becoming unscathed as well. Smiling, he told it that it wasn't the only one with a trump card, making the general lizard jump away to create distance. He activated his appraisal skill again, puzzled that there wasn't a single scratch on the general lizard despite feeling the impact. He confirmed that the general lizard didn't possess a skill that enhanced its durability, and suspected someone else's power was at play. He scanned the lizard soldiers, but couldn't see any particularly special skills. Then he found it. The lizard soldier in the far back had a substitute skill. He headed towards it, realizing it was taking the damage instead. Shocked, the lizard couldn't run away. He successfully stabbed it with his sword, telling it that it must be tough being reduced to a substitute. The lizard shook in pain and fell to the ground dead, as he told it not to take it personally. The general lizard screamed in anger and charged at him with its soldiers. He used his thread manipulation skill, grabbing the thread to hang above and dodge their attacks, shocking the general lizard. Swinging the threads on his fingers, he told them that gathering together made it easier for him. He threw a thread trap at them, and though the general screamed orders, it was too late. The trap ensnared the soldiers with the general, immobilizing them. He descended in front of the shocked general, telling it that it seemed like his victory, then slashed the general lizard's head. After slashing off the general lizard's head, he swiftly dispatched the remaining soldier lizards. Once the battle was over, he exclaimed excitedly, "It's time to eat." He reached for the magic bag he had bought with the money from the guild, knowing it was finally time to use it. The magic bag's interior space was expanded by magic, and its weight was completely reduced when closed. He took out his cooking utensils and seasonings from the bag. He then began to skin the general lizard, reflecting on how, when he was on the hidden floor, he had been desperate to survive, but had always wanted to try this. After expertly carving a perfect piece of meat from the lizard, he placed it on the pan and added some seasoning, wondering if monster meat could be delicious if cooked properly. As he watched the meat cook, his mouth watered. Taking a big bite, he chewed thoughtfully, amazed at how delicious it was. He continued eating, marveling aloud. Who would have thought monster meat could be so good? I might get addicted to this. As he ate, he acquired 4 skills: one-handed swordsmanship, shield technique, miasma resistance, and command. He pondered how monster meat could be so good, and whether it was related to the magic powers the monsters possess. He recalled the skills from the Minotaur, Armor Spider, and Evil Eye, which had been quite helpful. He also remembered the Thunder Wolf and the Black Serpent, whose skills he hadn't yet tried. After finishing his meal, he stood up excitedly, planning to try eating a variety of monsters on his way back. He looked down and saw the lizard with the substitute skill, making a mental note of its usefulness. A moment later, in the miasma labyrinth on the 21st floor, he encountered flying monsters and frog monsters. Activating his lightning cloak skill, he electrocuted them to death effortlessly, clearing the floor. He realized his lightning cloak skill was highly effective, especially against monsters specializing in inflicting status ailments. They had picked the wrong opponent. Taking out his pan, he excitedly declared, "Frog meat and insect dishes, coming right." He cooked the meats, making a fried chicken-like dish from the two monsters' meats. He happily eats the dish, noticing how soft the poison frog is and how the seasoning reminds him of Morpho, making him crave a beer. As he finishes, he acquires 5 new skills: venom, temperature variation, poison scale powder, paralysis scale powder, and aerial slash. Suddenly, he hears a loud crash and what sounds like a human voice. Curious and cautious, he wonders if other adventurers have made it this far. Quickly, he packs his pan into his magic bag, thanking it for the meal, and runs toward the source of the sound. It's rare to see other parties in combat, and he hopes he might exchange valuable information with them. Meanwhile, a scene of violence unfolds nearby. A man's sword drips with blood as a group of men gathers around a woman lying on the ground bleeding. She clutches her wounded shoulder, gasping for breath, while the men taunt her, mocking her for still having so much magic left. The man with the sword smirks, remarking that the trouble was worth it. He pulls down her head coat, revealing her elven features, and the greedy men smile as he wonders aloud how much she might be worth. But then Root arrives just in time and addresses the men, expressing his hope to make some adventurer friends, surprising them. He steps closer, stating that, while he doesn't know the full story, he can't stand by and watch a woman being attacked. The man with the sword demands to know who he is, and he replies that he is an adventurer. The woman, desperate, shouts a warning. Those men are adventurer hunters. Realization dawns on him. Adventurer hunters are notorious high-ranking adventurers. Using his appraisal skill, he identifies the man who stabbed the woman as Falses, level 65, in a miasma state. However, he's shocked to find he can't see Falses' status and rank. He checks the 3 other men and discovers he can't see their statuses, skills, or ranks either. They must have concealment skills or counter-magic tools. Falses orders his men to take him down, and the confrontation begins. One of the men, named Xerius, launched an attack on him. He was surprised by Xerius's speed, but fortunately, he managed to block the attack with his sword. Xerius teasingly remarked that he was doing pretty well, to which he replied that it was because Xerius was weak. This comment infuriated Xerius, who pressed his sword harder against him, shouting that he was not weak and that he was going to smash his head in. The other 2 men watched the confrontation silently. He inhaled deeply and activated his venom skill, spitting venom onto Xerius's face. The venom melted Xerius's face, causing him to scream in agony. The other men called out to Xerius in panic, questioning if he had just spit venom. They both thought it was almost as if he were a monster. He knew it was a reckless way of fighting, completely unlike the typical adventurer, but it was how he, a weak person, had survived. Falses asked if that poison was a unique skill, acknowledging that it looked like he couldn't be underestimated. False has then ordered his men to charge at him, all 3 of them. The 2 men moved forward first, swinging their swords at him from different sides. He realized that if he stopped dodging for even a second, he'd be killed. He jumped backward to create distance between himself and the 2 men, but suddenly a foot appeared in front of him. He was shocked to see Falses ready to kick his head. He immediately activated his steel body skill. Falses' kick connected and he was thrown into the poisonous swamp. Falses realized he was tough, certain he had broken his neck. He stood up while the brown-haired man excitedly declared that he was going to snuff out his life right away. However, he just stood up and ran deeper into the swamp, prompting the man to shout at him not to start running now. When the man was about to chase after him, Falses ordered him to stop, warning that the poisonous swamp wasn't a place one could venture into and come out alive. He reminded the man that they shouldn't be able to withstand the poisonous swamp either, and that he would come out soon enough. A moment later, he was still in the swamp. They asked him how long he planned to stay in that poisonous swamp and told him they should compete like adventurers. He knew he was lucky to have fallen into the poisonous swamp. On top of the usual miasma, the poisonous vapors around the swamp would also rapidly drain the adventurer's stamina. The men were exhausted from the poison surrounding them and asked how long he planned to stay in the swamp. It had been about 10 minutes already, and they felt their heads hurt and their bodies grow sick. He walked out of the poisonous swamp, thinking it should be about time. He wanted to weaken them further, but if he took any longer, the situation would worsen since the lady was injured. As he approached them, he asked how it felt to be affected by both poison and miasma. The men in return asked if he had finally given up, telling him he had caused them a lot of trouble. He calmly replied that, unfortunately, he was unaffected by any status abnormalities, so he didn't really know how much pain they were all feeling. Falsis was infuriated when he realized that he had the abnormal status nullification skill and had tricked them. Falsis shouted orders to his men to kill him immediately. The men rushed at him. One of the men tried to slash him, but he easily blocked the attack, surprising the man. He pushed the man back, smiling as he explained that the poison in the swamp gradually drained their stamina and the accumulated miasma inside their bodies lowered their stats. He sensed someone approaching from the side and saw the brown-haired man ready to attack. He immediately used his steel body skill. When the man struck, his sword hit steel, shocking and confusing him. He then released electricity, activating his lightning cloak skill, which electrocuted the two men. One of the men died, but the brown-haired man, still conscious, tried to attack again, cursing in anger. He released a strong power from his hand, using his aerial slash skill to strike. Falsis, watching, couldn't believe he possessed venom, a steel body, a lightning cloak, and even the aerial slash skill. Fear gripped Falsis as he asked why in the world a human had monster skills, but he rushed at Falsis, replying that he had no obligation to explain. He attacked Falsis, who tried to block, thinking that despite his supposed superiority in fighting humans, the miasma was going to cause his defeat. In a rage, Falsis used his agility enhancement and launched his sword at him with all his might, unable to accept losing to someone like him. Brood activated his physical boost and counterattacked. One of their swords broke in half. It was Falsi's sword. Falsi's body fell to the ground in half, but Rude knew that without the abnormal statuses, Falsis would have been much stronger. Then helped the lady, who thanked him for saving her, saying she didn't know what would have happened without him. He replied that he couldn't just leave her in that situation. He noticed that she was trying to be brave, but her body was still affected by the miasma. He told her he did what he could for first aid, but he knew it was rare to see an elf in such a remote area. He wondered what circumstances had led her to be chased by adventurer hunters. Suddenly, the labyrinth shook with a loud scream, and they encountered a huge moth blocking their way. He activated his appraisal skill, guessing it must be the leader of those moths. It was Mosphis's great level 37 species insect. And it had skills like poison scales, paralyzing scales, poison resistance, miasma resistance, aerial slash, and moth eyes. He jumped to gain height and launched his sword at it, taunting that mere size wouldn't bring him down. The moth released an aerial slash, which made him panic, but he managed to dodge it. The lady narrowly avoided being hit as well. He asked if she was okay, to which she replied yes. Then he mockingly called the Mosphis great a beast for scaring him, promising to return the favor. He questioned the moth if it thought flying put it out of his reach. Activating his aerial slash skill, he threw it at the moth, shattering its wings and body. Enraged, it attacked with paralyzing scales, but he let them hit him, teasing that paralysis had no effect on him. However, he suddenly realized the danger to the lady as the Mosphas great aimed for her. She lifted her wand, releasing a powerful gust of air that dispelled the paralyzing scales. He was surprised but expected such power from an elf. A few minutes later, they defeated the Mosphas great. She asked if poison and paralysis didn't affect him either, noting that his skills were almost like a monster's. This made him wonder how to explain it, but then she doubled over in pain, causing him to panic. He asked if she was hit by the paralyzing scales, but she said no, it was something different. She then told him that once they got out of there, she would share her story. A moment later, they managed to escape the miasma labyrinth and sat down at the foot of a huge tree outside. She sighed and, smiling, told him that it felt much better now that she was out of the labyrinth. She then introduced herself as Alicia, a former adventurer. He was surprised to hear her name and asked if she was Alicia of the Emerald Storm, making her laugh and confirm that he knew her. He explained that he knew of the Kingdom of Ludeus's renowned S-rank party, Azure Trails, and that everyone knew its members. However, if he recalled correctly, Azure Trails had disbanded. She agreed, explaining that 5 years ago, they were defeated by monsters. On that day, they challenged the monster awaiting them at the deepest part of the S-rank labyrinth, the Abyssal Labyrinth. In that battle, their leader died. One member had to retire due to severe injuries, another was swallowed by the labyrinth, and she herself did not come out unscathed. She then pulled her shirt down slightly, making him panic and ask what she was doing. He stopped when he saw the mark on her chest. She explained that it was a curse placed on her at that time, the curse of level down. He calmed down and told her he had never heard of such a curse before. She replied that she hadn't either and had tried every possible method to break it, but all she could do was slow its progression. She also revealed that the adventurer hunters knew about her curse and planned to profit from it. She knew she would die if her level reached 0, but she couldn't bear being at such guy's mercy. He looked at her sadly in silence, but then realized something. He told her he might be able to help with her curse. He took out his adventurer ID and saw that he had a substitute skill that allowed him to take on others' attacks and status ailments. He asked her if she could trust him to activate the skill, which confused her at first, but she agreed. He placed his hand on her shoulder and activated his substitute skill. She was surprised to see the curse transfer to him. She shouted for him to stop, warning that the curse would affect him. He smiled and assured her that it was all right and she should trust him. She looked up in horror as the curse reached him, but then a bright light stopped it. He had activated his unique skill, Abnormal Status Nullification, which dissolved the curse into dust. He removed his hand from her shoulder, glad that it seemed to be working. She was stunned and asked what had happened. He told her to check her guild card. She did, and saw that her status had returned to normal. She couldn't believe the curse had been lifted. He explained that his unique skill, Abnormal Status Nullification, might nullify her curse if he took it on. She called him an idiot for taking such a risk for someone he just met, but then tearfully and happily thanked him. He smiled, welcoming her while comforting her. Later, in the Bologna Tavern, Alicia slammed her mug of beer on the table and happily burped. She told him that the food was cheap and the alcohol was delicious, which meant he sure did know a good place. He gave her a thumbs up in response, remembering how they got kicked out last time. He then asked if she was okay drinking that much, reminding her that she had been badly injured just a moment ago. She replied that she had come back and recovered. She then clinked her mug against his, asking excitedly how they could not drink on such an auspicious day. He asked her what she planned to do from now on, to which she replied that she would like to know more about him first, which surprised him. She then asked why he decided to become an adventurer. He replied that long ago, the village he lived in was attacked by monsters. Because of those monsters, he lost his family and friends, but thanks to an S-rank adventurer who rushed to the scene, faced the monsters that were about to devour him, and killed them, he survived. He would never forget the sight of that adventurer. Because of that, he wanted to become an S-rank adventurer himself someday, so he could save many people as well. She smiled and told him it was a noble goal. He asked if she wasn't going to laugh, and she replied that she also dreamed of reaching S-rank herself. Besides, she intended to gain more power than she had before she was cursed. She also mentioned that she was certain her companions were still trapped in the deepest part of the Abyssal Labyrinth. Regardless of the outcome, she intended to challenge that monster once again. But for now, at least until they had both gained enough strength to achieve their goals, she suggested they form a party together. He was about to respond when someone grabbed Elish's hand, remarking that he had quite the fine girl to drink with and calling him a miasma scavenger, which made him remember that they were the men from before. The men surrounded them, telling Alicia not to drink with a boor like him and asking her to join them instead. He grabbed one of the men and ordered him to let go of her. The man, pissed, grabbed his collar and called him a little shit. He glared furiously at the two men and they stared back. Alicia shouted at them to stop, reminding them they were in a pub and if they wanted to fight, they should do something else. A moment later, she was sitting with the two men, their beers in front of them. She shouted that they should settle it by seeing who could drink the most, which cheered everyone up. The two men, thinking they would win, started drinking eagerly. The mugs of beer piled up on their table, and the other patrons cheered. He smiled as he watched Alicia, and the pub became lively and happy. A moment later, the two men were down and drunk, but Alicia was still energetic, making the other patrons cheer for her and announce her as the winner. She looked at him proudly, and he gave her a thumbs up. They then walked to the side, and he told her she did great, considering she had already drunk quite a lot before the drinking contest. She laughed proudly and told him that he was her benefactor, and she hadn't fallen so low that she would just sit still when her benefactor was being ridiculed. However, the alcohol soon got to her and she collapsed against his chest. He smiled, thinking it couldn't be helped. He used his substitute skill on her once again, and she woke up feeling fine. He explained that he transferred her drunkenness to himself because he couldn't get drunk. She excitedly told him that he first lifted her curse and now her drunkenness, calling his skill wonderful and insisting they should definitely form a party together. She then headed back to the other men, telling them they should drink some more. The men responded that she should do it in moderation. She then looked at the special salt-grilled barnavas in the frame and sadly said it was too bad she couldn't try their special dish. The chef explained that it seemed a monster had taken up residence in the Barnavas fishing grounds and that he had already sent a request to the guild. However, all the top adventurers were currently out. The chef then asked if they would be willing to take on the request. The next day, at the Barnavas fishing ground, they arrived at the sea. Belisha excitedly remarked that it was the Barnavas fishing grounds. She then told him they should defeat the monsters immediately and enjoy some special dishes, to which he agreed. Suddenly, he felt something on his side and immediately dodged an attack from beneath the water. He alerted her that the monster the chef had mentioned was there, but they were both shocked to realize they were surrounded by multiple monsters. She exclaimed that there was no way they could kill them all. They then noticed more monsters below their boat. Using his appraisal skill, he identified the creatures as Jernabes, level 23, with a middle status and possessing 3 skills: high-speed swimming, water bullets, and snipe. One of the Jernabes hurled a water bullet at them, which he blocked with his sword. However, when the Jernabes attacked together, he panicked, struggling to block all the projectiles that came one after another. Realizing he couldn't fend them off indefinitely, he leapt into the sea, shocking Alicia. He landed in the midst of the Jernabes and taunted them by calling them small fry. Daring them to attack him all at once, the Jernabes charged at him with their high-speed swimming. He then released electricity and attacked them with his lightning cloak, electrocuting them and illuminating the underwater scene. The Jernabes floated dead in the water, and he lifted his head to catch his breath. Alicia wordly called his name and he assured her that everything was fine. However, he knew some Jernabes remained, and noticed they were deep underwater. This made him wonder if they were being cautious or protecting something. He shouted to Alicia that he was going to dive deeper to investigate. He also told her that he had a request, which confused her. Afterward, he swam deeper into the sea with a rope tied around his body. The Jernabes weren't fleeing, indicating they were protecting something. He was shocked to see a huge monster surrounded by Jernabes. Using his appraisal skill, he identified it as a tentaclus, level 38. It had 4 skills: paralysis poison, autotomy, poison resistance, and accelerated healing. He thought it might be a giant sea anemone or a hermit crab, but then he saw one of its tentacles crack, fall off, and transform into a Jernabe. He realized the tentaclus was creating the Jernabes. He swam up, knowing that defeating the tentaclus was crucial. Without defeating it, killing Jernabes would be pointless, since the tentaclus wasn't attacking. He decided to prepare, unaware of a tentacle near his foot. Suddenly, the tentacle wrapped around his leg, pulling him down. He was shocked to see it dragging him back, and then the Jernabes rushed to attack, making him realize their previous hesitation was a distraction to divert his attention from the tentacle's feelers. He then grabbed the tentacle near him, thinking that if it wanted to play, he would play back. Activating his lightning cloak, he electrocuted the Jernabes and the tentacle monster. He knew that as long as it touched him directly, even the huge creature would be electrocuted. However, he was surprised when the tentacles he electrocuted broke off. He remembered the auto-tome skill and realized that the creature had avoided a fatal injury by immediately severing its feelers as soon as they were struck by lightning. The monster then lunged at him, catching him off guard. Feeling his breath running out, he quickly pulled the rope tied around his body. Alicia saw this and used her wind power to move the boat, pulling the rope and dragging him away just in time to avoid the attack. The tentacles glared furiously at him, but he floated to the surface. Moments later, they were on the shore and he lay on the sand, catching his breath. Alicia asked him wordly if he was okay. He sat up and told her that, thanks to her, He was, and that she had saved him. He then explained that there was a boss deep underwater continuously producing gurnaipes, and that it also had accelerated healing skills, so he needed to hurry back. She pointed out that the monsters had a huge advantage over them in the water, and that her magic wouldn't reach down there either. When she asked if he had a plan, he replied that there was one way, but he needed to make up his mind. He reminded himself that Alicia had told him about her curse, and even formed a party with him, so before she could reply, he had to tell her his secret. He then walked closer to a dead gurnave and begged her not to tell anyone what he was about to show her. A moment later, the tentacles and the gurnaves were peacefully under the sea, but then the tentacles sensed someone approaching. It saw him diving down at high speed, using his swimming skills. The gurnaves rushed to meet and stop him, but he easily slashed through them with his sword while continuously diving deeper. The tentaclous tentacles moved to attack him, but he skillfully dodged them and rushed towards its head. He then stabbed its body and, declaring that he would finish it, used his lightning cloak to directly electrocute the creature. He successfully kills the tentacle monster, knowing that with it gone, the fishing spot should return to its peaceful state. However, he's concerned about Alicia because, after seeing him devour a monster, he wonders how she is feeling and what she will say when they get back. He rises from the sea and feels sad when he sees that Alicia is not on the shore. Smiling sadly, he walks to the shore, wondering why he assumed she would wait for him. He tells himself that he got his hopes up again, but then he is surprised when he hears her telling him that he is late. He sees her holding a branch of trees and asking if he is hurt and if he took down the boss. He stutteringly replies, "Yes." She is glad, explaining that she couldn't just sit still while waiting, so she started gathering some branches for the campfire because it's good for drying clothes. He is stunned in surprise and asks her if she is okay with what she saw him do. She replies that it did surprise her quite a bit, but he trusted her enough to reveal his secret, which made her happier than anything else. Awkwardly, he thanks her and tells her he understands. Then he remembers something and surprises her by pulling a fishing net out of the sea. He tells her he wants to get the boss's skill as well, so he cut off a part to bring it back, thinking it might be strange if only he ate. He grabs the fish next to the boss meat as she walks closer. Showing the fish to her, he tells her it's a barnamaz he brought back. He thinks it might be weird to eat next to a monster, but he hopes she will like it. When he looks back, he sees her excitedly shout that she'll eat it, making him laugh. He tells her that while they are eating, he'll tell her about the first time he ate a monster. Once they are all set and have eaten their food, Alicia tells him that it is so delicious and that she understands why he eats monsters. She knows there is a reason for it. He replies that thanks to it, he, a Destiny rank weakling, got a step closer to his dream. She tells him that she understands and that he used that power to save her from adventurer hunters and the curse. She also remarks that when the food is cooked like this, monsters taste quite delicious, while looking at the jernabi fillets and miso braised tentacles. He excitedly agrees with her, telling her that, surprisingly, monsters taste pretty good. He also tells her that he doesn't actually need to eat jernabi anymore, but he wants to try cooking it properly. He asks her if she would like to try it, to which she replies that there is no guarantee she'll survive with the same symptoms, so she'll pass. After eating her barnamas, Alicia once again asks him if he will join her party. He becomes quiet and asks if she doesn't have stronger acquaintances. She replies that it's been 5 years since she got cursed, and even if they didn't die in the labyrinth, considering the human lifespan, many of her acquaintances might have retired. Also, most adventurers on the front lines have quite a few screws loose, so no matter how strong they are, she can't trust them to watch her back. For adventuring together, she wants someone she can trust with ease of mind, and if it was him, she thinks she could do that, which surprises him. He then closes his eyes to think for a moment, smiles, and agrees to form a party with her. The next morning, they head to the Adventurers Guild Barona branch. Alicia excitedly tells him that they should get ready for their first job as a party. He responds that with one of them being E rank, he doubts they'll get any big requests. She replies that he is probably right, so she had planned for their first time. They enter the Adventurer Guild and head to the receptionist. Alicia tells the receptionist that they are forming a party today and asks if she can register them while giving her guild card. The receptionist is shocked when she sees that Alicia is an S-rank adventurer, known as Alicia of the Emerald Storm, with a level of 43, high status, a spirit magic unique skill, and many other skills. The receptionist asks why someone like her is partying with a miasma scavenger, but Alicia leans closer in anger. The receptionist fearfully tells her it was nothing and that she understands. Alicia then asks about ranking him up and rudely inquires about the missing requirements. The receptionist looks at his record and replies that he has gathered enough achievements, but his battle record is lacking. Alicia then asks for the highest difficulty subjugation requests they can take on together. The receptionist immediately agrees and tells them that right now it would be the extermination of a pack of gray wolves. Later, they arrive at the mission site. He notices that the gray wolves are only level 11, with low status and only scent detection skills. He uses his stealth skill to get closer to the wolves without them noticing him. When he lifts the stealth, the wolves notice him, but it is too late. He swiftly slashes them with his sword. The distant wolves see the danger and howl to call the rest of the pack. The pack of wolves appears and rushes to attack, but he shouts to Alicia that he'll leave the reinforcements to her. She agrees and releases her power to call Sylphide. She then tells Sylphide to lend her power, and he is surprised to see it, knowing it is her unique skill, spirit magic. Sylphide heads towards the wolves coming Alicia's way. Alicia orders Sylphide to release a great wind to slice through them, which she does, slashing the wolves in front of her into pieces and making the forest shake with the force of her power. He looks at the slashed ground, thinking that it is tremendous power and there is no way one would be able to dodge it. She tells him that her power before getting cursed won't come out after all. He replies with a thumbs up and can't imagine what it would have been like at full strength. Suddenly, he feels danger behind him. When he looks back, a wolf is close to biting his head off. He curses in panic, realizing there are still so many of them hiding, and he can't block the wolf's attack in time. Alicia shouts for Sylphide, and they all vanish, confusing the wolf, which looks around for them. The wolf then hears them from above and sees them floating in the air. He excitedly asks her if she can do something like that too. He thanks her for saving his life, but she tells him that if he is thankful, he should thank that little one instead while looking at Sylphide. She then looks down and tells him that they can't let their guard down because she saw about 5 more wolves watching them from the bushes, and there are probably a lot more hiding. He tells her that it's his turn and uses his echolocation skill, which makes him see more packs of wolves hiding in the bushes around them. He smiles, knowing that combined with the ones they had already taken down, they'd achieve their goal at once. He then tells Alicia to attack where he indicates. The wolves are shocked when they see a bright green light heading in their direction, which makes them come out from hiding. She continuously attacks the side bushes, making the wolves run away from their hiding spots. Meanwhile, he hides in the middle bush. Knowing that echolocation loses precision in open spaces, and even Alicia can't target too many spots accurately at once. However, if they attack from the sides, they can herd the gray wolves into one place. A moment later, she sighs, having done her part. When the wolves are gathered together in one spot, he comes out of hiding and uses his paralyzing breath skill, causing the wolves to collapse and become unable to move. He then grabs his sword and starts killing them. An hour later, he tells her that there are 52 wolves in total. She excitedly responds that she can't believe they encountered so many in one day. He tells her that maybe their numbers have just increased that much. He then asks her if it was spirit magic she used earlier. She replies yes, and explains that she can use magic by borrowing power from the spirits that exist in nature. She then introduces him to Sylphide and explains that spirits are generally everywhere, even though they don't show themselves. To use their power, one needs to offer magic as compensation. Even so, powerful magic can be cast with little magic energy. As he saw earlier, Sylphide can cause phenomena such as floating in the air. Sylphide flies down onto his head, and he tells her that he had never heard of wind magic that strong before. Sylphide pulls his hair, causing him pain, and he tries to take Sylphide off his head. Alicia explains that Sylphide loves to play pranks, and the more he reacts, the more she enjoys it. She then calls Sylphide and tells him that the sky will be dark soon, and she wants to get back quickly. She makes him float in the air and tells him that they should fly back part of the way today. They begin to fly back to the Adventurer Guild, and he excitedly tells her that it is the best. He then asks her what other types of spirit magic she can use. She replies that she specializes in water, ice, light, and earth, but spirits of darkness and fire aren't a good match for her. If a spirit has bad compatibility with him, it demands an enormous amount of magic power, and they might not even lend him power at all. Sylphide floats in front of him, while Alicia tells him that it means Sylphide likes him too. Sylphide then pulls his ear, making him point at her, and asks Alicia if Sylphide likes him even with that. She laughingly replies yes, but then Sylphide stops when they both see something ahead of them. He tells Alicia that smoke is rising there. She tells him that there should be a village in that direction. Unbeknownst to them, a huge monster is the cause of the fire,